As you all probably know, Lorcan is a 2017 scholar and Director of Business Development at corporate communications consultancy Keatings and Associates. And in a former life, he was agribusiness editor with the Farmers Journal and business editor with the Business Post. So a lot to digest there. Two really excellent, well done, another really excellent presentation, Molly. So your first thoughts, Lorcan, on the two presentations?
Yeah, two great presentations. It's funny how sort of as much as things change, a lot of things don't change at all. Like particularly Niall's one felt very familiar to me. Like my report in 2017 was on the social license of farming, and you'd hit on an awful lot of the same, identified a lot of the same topics and issues and kind of concerns I would have raised at the time.
Does that show how little has changed? That was 8 years ago.
Well, I'd like to reflect on my career has taken me, I suppose I spent most of my career training with the Farmers Journal, and I was very, very tuned into the agri-food industry in Ireland, knew people up and down the country, and the strength of this industry is the people. I always believe in it, and there's this great passion and energy in the agri-food industry. When I left and went to the Business Post, it actually provided me the opportunity to step away and sort of look back in again. And I was just thinking there as both presentations, like there's a sort of paranoia sometimes in the farming industry or the food industry in Ireland, like you're using words like crisis and the risks and the threats to the industry almost. But I have to say, from my experience of when with the Business Post, like I was working in a newsroom with people who were very urban, South Dublin type people, and their views, and I find this still like in all of the industries I would have worked with, whether it was renewable energy, finance, banking, whatever sectors that I happened to learn about in that period, the view of the agri-food industry I find is very, very positive. With most people, there's huge recognition for some of the great companies that have come out of this industry, and that's backed up consistently by a lot of the research. Like Borbia regularly does consumer research, which shows most people have a very, very positive view in Ireland of the agri-food industry. And they also, like today, if you were to survey them, I think without question, the biggest issue that consumers will tell you, it's food price inflation. Yeah. It's the things that matter to them on a day-to-day basis. Like, yes, they want their food produced in a sustainable way, but like their day-to-day is, their reality is defined by their shopping price every day. So while it's not to say that the agri-food industry should just, there's no risks here, of course we should. And I think Niall was absolutely on the money, and you touched on it too, Molly, is that working with having integrity in your systems of what you do, like Laura Burke is here, and water quality and nitrates is obviously a hugely topical issue at the minute. But I remember speaking to Jenny Deacon, who leads a lot of EPA's water program that's the kind of expertise that the Irish food industry is engaged with. Those are the people you put your trust in and work with directly for the kind of integrity, data-driven results that show you're doing the right thing.
And even staying with Niall's presentation, and both of you have worked in ag journalism, and I know, as you were saying, that the general person on the street's view of farming and farmers is in general quite positive. But definitely, and I don't know if it's something that you've noticed in your work, that because of a polarisation of the debate, there is a reluctance among a lot of farmers to stick their head above the parapet and to be spokespeople. And even on my time working on Ear to the Ground, almost like a tap switched off maybe 5 years ago, more than that, where you would ring people up and ask them, will they come on Ear to the Ground? Can we visit their farm? Can they do an interview about X, Y, or Z? And more farmers were saying no, that they didn't want to do it. So I don't know if that's something that you've seen, that on the farmer side of it, they definitely did feel scapegoated.
Unquestionably, and that's like a symptom of social media and how farming, it was very noticeable, farmers, people felt very under threat and under attack. And I mean, a former colleague in the Farmers Journal once said to me how, what has happened? Farming used to be such a noble pursuit, producing food to feed people. How have we lost that? I don't think the industry has. I think it just feels like that because there's such an echo chamber maybe on social media, and it's been able to step back and recognize that 60% that you talked about, the bigger picture, that's where the real efforts should be. You're never going to convince those people on social media. And I think the industry has learned that now. It's much more strategic in how it approaches engagement on difficult issues like.
And in a way, I suppose, now, did your experience working in journalism help you decide on what you wanted to research for Nuffield?
Well, that was it. I was still working with the Irish Independent at the time when I began in September of 2023. And as you mentioned there, even to get interviewees to participate in an interview, it became harder and harder. And then they're also looking for a copy of it before it's printed to have a look over and make sure Jesus everything. So the trust is kind of broken there a little bit between the media and farmers. And I would say that is down to social media as well. Stuff can be taken out of context. But I'd agree with Lorcan as well that it can often be a storm in a teacup, and it often can be farmers sharing these negative headlines amongst themselves. But then, like, also, well, inherently with media as well, like, you do have to take the best line, the most triggering piece in the story to get the click. But that's the nature of the game now. Like, when it was print journalism, you bought the paper because you respected the brand. But now it's a free-for-all. There's any amount of sources, and if you're on social media and you want to get that click through, you have to differentiate yourself with something that's going to trigger the click.
Absolutely. And Molly, Niall mentioned trust being broken, and conflict is something, good conflict and high conflict, that you looked at in your research. Was that a starting point for you, looking at the fact that trust was broken?
Yeah, if I think about the Nuffield is a 2-year journey, and a huge amount can change in 2 years. So casting my mind back to when I was applying 2023, if you can remember, we were in the middle of the Green Deal. There was a huge amount of policies, things being pushed through, and there was a huge amount of protests being carried out against it. And it just felt to me that this was unproductive. Protest is really important, and it's really important to make your voices heard, but why weren't the right voices heard in the very beginning to make the right policy created so we didn't have to go through this proposal, protest, rejection, start again, back to zero again and again? So I was really curious, what's underneath this? What are the foundational things that have gone a little bit amiss that means that we're not able to work in a way that brings us all collectively forward?
Because and it is the collective. I mean, there's a common theme of unity in both presentations, Lorcan. For Niall's, I suppose, even as regards farming representation, is something that you were looking at, and for Molly about working together, whether you want to work together or not, and conflict being a good thing.
I agree with that. And again, to go back to when I was in the business post, I think a lot of those people my colleagues, they could not understand. Like, they just occasionally looked into the agri-food industry about some story. They just didn't understand the politics of it, or why is there so many of this? Why is there, like, it's, as I said, probably the greatest strength of the industry is its people, but it's something that for the outside world looking in sometimes to the industry or how it engages, having a more unified voice and messaging on certain things is certainly something that we should probably think about, because it's something that probably puzzles people who aren't familiar with it, or the different reasons behind this, that, and the other, how these situations have come about. That why is there so many different voices here? Why are they all competing? Because at the end of the day, as you pointed out, it's far more effective to have one that you're speaking as one to, maybe for the particularly key high-level stuff. You can argue the point after that then internally in the industry.
And that's something, Niall, with the farming organisations. You had examples in other countries where the voice was more unified, but some people might say it can be a disparate group, and for every different farmer might have different needs, and in order to be properly represented, they might feel they need their own representation, their own separate organisation. But that's not something you saw in your studies.
Well, that's it. Like agriculture is not a homogenous bunch. Like, we don't all do the exact same thing. But in places like New Zealand, there's not perfect federated farmers, and Switzerland, they have an umbrella organisation on the key matters. I think it's good to have a host of farm lobbies that represent farmer views, but I think there needs to be like a farmers' assembly or some sort of an umbrella group that, when on key issues that we can all agree on that affect us all, like nitrates, water quality, that you have an agreement, and then when you're going into a minister or Brussels or wherever it is, that you have a coherent message and you don't give them an easy way out, because as many former ministers told me during the research, that if you have 12 lads coming into you, all pulling in different directions, the minister's laughing, you know.
But for a lot of people, the farming representations and organisations would be the envy of other European countries. They seem to have quite a loud voice in Brussels and places like that. But from your point of view, the umbrella organisation in Switzerland, do you think that's a more efficient way of doing it?
Well, on issues that we all can agree on, like definitely, I'm not saying to all huddle into one lobby, but I'm saying like definitely to have like some sort of a umbrella or an assembly and like a list of issues that we all can be on the same line on. And then when it comes to the bit, you have a representative that is acting on behalf of all farmer interests and gets a good outcome and doesn't let the minister or commissioner, whoever it is on the day, away with it.
Okay, and speaking of, I suppose, things that you learned on your travels, and you had some examples, Molly, from Denmark, from America, of the way, I suppose, disparate groups can come together, disagree on some things and agree on others. And this tripartite in Denmark is something, I know we spoke about it earlier and I didn't know much about, but can you explain to me, is that still in its infancy and is it still working?
Yeah, so this one would be very much in its infancy. It's about 1.5 years in, and it's as I said, it's a very challenging suite of agriculture and environmental policies that have been agreed as whole of government. And it, on the face of it, is exceptionally challenging from the agricultural perspective, but it has been negotiated in such a way that it is the best for the business realities of the people farming in Denmark. I wanted to bring up a point that you made, Lorcan, about how outside of the agri-food industry and sector, there's a very positive regard of the sector from the outside. But I wanted to bring in again my point about mixed professional profiles and how silos are formed from the beginning. And we have to remember that Ireland has been a primarily rural country for a very, very long time, and only recently we've shifted towards being an urban country. And only recently would you meet a decent amount of people who aren't farming, don't have a direct farmer in their friend or family circle, don't even have it in their extended friend or family circle. So the topic of food in general is very interesting to everybody. However, if the farming and agri-food industry is not effective in communicating what they're doing and what we're doing, then you access, if you're passionate about food, you access it through other areas. And then you build an idea of what the problems are and what the future should be without ever knowing somebody who's actively farming. And I think that's something that we would do well to address.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things I remember, it was a recommendation from my Nuffield in 2017, was by far the best thing that Nuffield, of the whole Nuffield experience, and I think most scholars would agree, the best thing of it all is the farm visits. We meet farmers in different parts of the world, and you go on their farm and you meet them and see their business and learn about what they do. And I came back thinking that that's a great way we should be thinking about how do we educate consumers. And there's a tourism opportunity in it. Like there should be, you go to France, into Bordeaux, and you can do the wine region, and you'll go to a winery, and they'll talk about the terroir and the soil and the grape, and you'll go out and look at the crops being produced, and then you'll go into the house and you'll drink a glass of wine. I hope everyone's holidays are like that. That's what I do anyway. I did. Like we should be doing that in Ireland with our food, where a tourist comes into Ireland, tourists and consumers here, you go out to Ashburn and Mead and you go on a tillage farm, or you go on a beef farm or a dairy farm, and then you meet the farmer and you get to maybe consume some of that product in a kind of artisan style that the consumers can see the farm to fork through, and you get to talk about the realities of farming. Now that isn't for every farmer, but surely there is a kind of a food trail type thing. You see it in Kentucky, they have the whiskey trails or the bourbon trails. I mentioned France. We've such high quality food here in terms of particularly on our meat and dairy and our grains and whiskey. We should be trying to tell that story. And like not only would tourists come and enjoy something like that, because and you hear all the time that people want experiences. What better experience could you give them than putting them out on the farm? And so not every farmer go for that, but farmers are innovative, and if they see that that works for them financially, why wouldn't they open
And the
door?
retailers spotted it work financially a long time ago. That's why we have big posters of farmers in every supermarket.
It's
you go into,
authentic. It's
you
really
know.
authentic.
Yeah, and it comes back to owning I know you want to come in, Molly, but it comes back to owning the narrative, which is kind of one of the key points of your presentation, Niall.
That's it. I think I'd agree with Lorcan. Like it is, we do have a good narrative to tell there, and like the reason we bring all in these regulations is that we can back it up. And like Ireland is the envy of the world when it comes to the network that we have, like the different organisations and how they work across each other. So, yeah.
And you wanted to come in there on something that Lorcan was saying?
Yeah, I think that I think this is a really, really good idea for getting us to love our own food as well. But I think we need to go deeper, and we need to go into education, and we need to go into professions, and think of people who aren't farming not just as off-takers, but as taking part as well. So in our educational settings, one of my recommendations is you need agri-business professionals and environmental scientists together. We need to combine the knowledge bases. I've had the pleasure to work with the Irish Youth Food Forum, which is 2 years in. It's 2 years old now.
Tell us a bit about the forum.
So that was set up that's being operated by DAFM and IFIAD and Irish Aid. And it is a platform for any food professional, farmer, industry, advocate, researcher, between the age of 22 and 30 to share space, create events together, learn about each other's professions and create policy. And the subtle but really, really important effect of that forum, I think, is that you get to meet people from across the aisle and work with them and understand their job pressures, understand their job reality, and have really tricky conversations like, you believe that? Or how did you even get to that point? But in a way that's not threatening, that's safe, that's generally private, and then it helps you to work on your own biases. So you still might ultimately disagree with them and disagree with them in public, but at least you understand better where they're coming from.
One thing that struck me, and if we're talking about, you touched on the them versus us, and I know we touched on, I suppose, the fact that social media has kind of, I suppose, in some way almost jumped ahead of traditional media. It's where people get their information from. And Niall, you were talking about sometimes you're better off not engaging in the conflict and not entering into a conversation with somebody because you give it more oxygen. But if we look at, for example, what happened recently with the Ireland milk scandal, and TikTokers and influencers were filming themselves pouring milk down a drain because of this, what they decided was an additive to the milk that was dangerous to human health, none of which had any scientific backing, but gained huge traction and had a big impact on farmers. When it comes to things like that, and social media seizing with something, and it's conflict and it's clickbait and people will engage with it, are you better not engage with it? Are you better addressing the science behind it? What's the best way of addressing issues like that?
Well, it's just unfortunate the way media has developed that these companies who make huge profits off the back of these posts don't better regulate it and fact check it and step in when like something that's clearly misinformation is being widely spread. So I think there's an onus on these companies, and I think they do get a bit of a free pass because of the revenue that they do generate, and it's a harder space to regulate. Like traditional media, there's a commission of man who would never let the likes of the Independent or the Times away with what happens on Instagram or Facebook. So I think it's just unfortunate, and I think the onus is on these companies to step in quicker in that case.
But I don't think it's ever going to change because, I mean, Donald Trump didn't like that he got kicked off Twitter, so he actually built his own social media platform. Like, there's always going to be something new, and I don't think you'll ever regulate the internet in that way. I mean, experience has kind of taught us that these things come and go, and they can be, they can seem like it's taken over, but then it's sort of like that's sort of gone now. That doesn't feel like it's a burning issue anymore. Like, there was a big spike in talk about it, but I'm sure the drive to reduce methane will continue and the science will go. I mean, and that's the thing, is being able to step back. As I said, a really good book that people should read is called Factfulness, and it's a really easy to read book, but it's by a Swedish professor, Hans Rosling. And he just lays out all the statistics over like the last 100 years, and like, look how much progress we've made as a global society. And sometimes it can seem like the world is on fire and everything is going to pot. And he's like, all of the trends across human health, life expectancy, wealth, all have trended massively in the right direction over the last 100 years and are continuing to go like that. And it's kind of stepping back from the here and now and being able to look with a bit of perspective. Like when water quality first became an issue, and the pressure was coming on, there was a kind of a paralysis maybe in the industry, like how are we going to deal with this? This is such a challenge. But then when you work with, as I mentioned, Jenny Deacon and the EPA and scientists and everything like that, I never had any doubt that the industry will be able to solve the problem, because there's brilliant technical, scientific farmers out there working closely with their advisors. We will make progress on it. And we've seen steps in that direction and positive. It's just having confidence in the long term that we'll get there. You would never achieve anything like that, complex overnight. But it's having the perspective saying we'll get there.
I know one thing, Lorcan, as well, that you particularly wanted to touch on, and probably in relation to Molly's presentation more, that Molly, you were saying that travelling within Europe and outside Europe and looking at the regulatory landscape within Europe, and your perspective changed once you saw systems elsewhere. And I think you used the word regulatory imperialism, Lorcan, that this is something that you were keen to touch on.
It's like when we talk about sort of standards and communications, and like Mercosur is a live issue at the minute, and a lot of the argument against it would be, well, they have lower standards than us, and if they want to export food in here, then they have to be up to our standards. But I mean, for farmers, that's a difficult line to toe to sort of tell somebody in a different country what you need to do or what standards, because at the same time, is that not that farmers are complaining that environmentalists are saying to them, saying, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that? It's something that Europe is great at creating regulation and standards and everything like that, but we should be careful that we don't kind of believe our own superiority, too much, and that the great thing about Nuffield is you have perceptions of different countries and how farm food is produced in them. Then when you go and stand and speak to a farmer in Chile or Brazil or in Africa, their reality is very different. Many challenges are similar around weather, but asking them to maybe meet the same things we have and income and all of that, it's a much more difficult thing to impose on them.
So to both of you, did your opinions change because of the travel?
Well, yeah, definitely. And just on Lorcan's point, like, it is a tricky piece there when you're talking about a country's sovereignty. And like, if you look at even Ireland in terms of the land area we've devoted to forestry and compare that to Brazil, we don't want to be in a position to be seen, you're pulling up the ladder behind you. Like, it is a tricky piece, but then also you have to lead by example. And in the case of Mercosur, expect like backstops and safe stops there if it is impacting the domestic market. So it's a really complex one.
Ali?
Definitely. I think it would be one of the most unique things of a Nuffield Scholarship is that you get to leave your island, you get to leave your continent and look at it from, it almost felt like I was on the moon looking back. Yeah.
So your opinions changed?
Yeah, they can't not when you do a Nuffield.
Okay. We do have a microphone here somewhere, and I'm sure we have questions. So if you want to raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you if you want to put questions to anyone on the panel. We have one there.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Sarah McIntosh here with Farmers Journal. Bringing it back to farm level, what supports and upskilling do you think farmers need to help control the narrative? Is there anything you saw abroad that you think we could implement at home?
Get Ivan Yates in for some media training, maybe.
You mightn't go too far wrong either, but at farm level, look, everyone has access to the internet now, so I think definitely there's that education piece through farm leaders need to influence the farmers themselves to tell them to, take a deep breath when you see a headline and to not just get as drawn in. But yeah, it's definitely a trickier one to, because everyone has free access to the internet. So yeah, they can definitely do what they like.
And then the conflict entrepreneurs as well. How do you handle them, Molly?
step around them. let them do their thing and go off and start a different thing. Yeah.
So
And
sometimes not engaging is a better
don't
thing.
engage. And the other thing I'd say would go back to my tip about introduce debate. So, do debating in schools, in Macra. It's likely happening, but let's invest in that more because it's a skill. And then we can get more used to what compromise feels like and control the narrative.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the new Project Connects kind of some of the. I've heard some of the things that they're looking at, but I mean, like the industry in Ireland, sometimes it's sort of stepping back from and recognizing things that we take for granted in the industry. That's like, well, sure, of course, that's every day. Like sometimes the outside consumer thinks that's brilliant, like and fascinating. And company I work with in my current job, TikTok. They're if you go and talk to TikTok, they will tell you that like farm talk is so important for them in Ireland. It's by far huge numbers. It's one of the biggest drivers of users in Ireland and abroad, and they love all their influencers that use farm talk. So again, we can think that social media, but for some of these companies like the farming and food industry, because consumers like seeing that, I mean, they don't want to see TikToks of somebody who works in the bank. They want to see someone, like there's real, genuine content that's out there that's kind of escapism from their maybe office job in the city or whatever, that they can, like that's real, tangible, it's experience-driven. And it's sort of recognizing those strengths and what is unique about this industry that we should be communicating to consumers like that.
And again, it's farmers owning the narrative then as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's, nobody else can step inside your farm gate and take ownership of that
I
content.
think it goes back to Niall put it well, proof, not PR.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, have we any other questions? With someone here? Yeah.
Hi, Jack O'Connor is my name. I'm with MSD Animal Health. Niall and Molly, well done. Great presentation. I suppose I just have a comment and then a question. So, Niall, you mentioned about proving it. And I do like Lorcan's idea of the visual proof and that bit of agri-tourism. But as we can see online, sometimes NGOs and others will, and animal rights activists, will challenge us on what we're saying we're doing. So I suppose my question is, are we missing a tool that's out there at the minute? And I suppose my opinion is that there's the world of data available and coming off farm to reinforce the practices the farmers are taking, I suppose, to prove our animal welfare claims, our water quality claims, and so on. So I suppose my question is, do you feel we're using those tools enough, and should we be trying to break down the silos, Molly, to come together more with one voice, to give farmers the tool that nearly takes away the argument from those that are coming at us and saying, no, you're not doing that. Well, we actually have proof points that we are. And just a comment would be to look to other markets. So the Swiss beef brand, they're garnering an extra €220 per carcass, and that's through their end-to-end traceability scheme. And here in Ireland as well, the swine industry is garnering an extra 10 cents per kilo through traceability as well. So we have proof that we've done this, but I'm just wondering, moving forward, can we do more in that area?
Okay. So use the data more, I suppose, to strengthen our arguments?
Well, yeah, that's a good suggestion in terms of dashboards, and as Lorcan brought up as well, Our Food Connects, I'm very interested to see. I see they published a website based on water quality, so having these tools and data and easily legible and accessible for farmers to understand and to be able to answer the questions that's asked of them, and then also to own our shortcomings as well when it comes to water quality. Things are like food production comes at a cost, and we don't have to have all the answers straight away. All we have to have is the right intentions and try to put a plan in place to get there.
Either of the other panelists like to address the...
Yeah, I would build on Niall's point is that you won't understand what proof is needed unless you understand the people and the reasons that they're asking for proof. So it's not just about sitting at a desk and getting data, but you have to get into the room with them and build relationships and understand what their background motivation is. Because if we just continue to think that we can finally find the answer, and then you have the answer and then it will stop, that's not going to, that wasn't the question.
But it's also important to recognize that there's certain cohorts as well that you know are never going to be satisfied no matter what you do. Like, so it's agreeing what is the level you need to get to, and building your and being comfortable in this is what we're doing, and not trying to bend over backwards always to prove yourself as the best in the class. Ever rising sort of targets that for somebody you know is not going to ever go, okay, well done, you've got it there now.
We're seeing a growing distrust of science and a growing distrust of data. So, yeah, sometimes
And
there
it's
is
not like farming isn't the only industry facing this. There's many other sectors that are totally challenged in the same way, where they're getting a lot of pressure and struggling to figure out a response.
Yeah. Okay. A question here.
Hi, just a quick question. I thought the presentations were excellent, but just one of the topics, and I'm sure it'll be addressed elsewhere, is the age profile of farming in Ireland. I think it's very easy to convince younger people of the need to move forward and to change and embrace sustainability. But I think it's much harder for the older people, and I would be interested just to know what your thoughts are in terms of how we address the lack of people coming into farming, and maybe at some point even just to understand from the Australian and French delegation, is it the same issue globally? Are we seeing the same problems? I mean, I know Niall presented the number of farmers, but I think if you did the age profile, it would be a very interesting statistic.
Okay. So how to get more young people, I suppose, involved, encourage more new entrants?
Well, I think it comes down to economics at the end of the day as well, and the opportunities that's out there. Like, I could name 100 people that have moved to Australia and New Zealand just for the better lifestyle, and because like farming is a vocation, and you have to really love what you do, but you can be tempted by other opportunities as well. So I think that's a reality. Like, the world has completely changed in the last couple of decades, and the opportunities that are out there are endless. I think a key thing, this sector has huge tax breaks currently for the inheritance of land, but what would be needed as well is like a farm retirement scheme that really gives that outlet for farmers who want to step back and pass it on to the next generation. And I think that's probably the biggest issue in Irish agriculture is the age profile that we have at the moment. And I think what we have, the system that we have in place, is it could be improved. But if I look to the Netherlands, oftentimes in order to inherit a farm, you have to take on a major amount of debt, and you have to create basically a massive pension pot for your parents. So, yeah, the Irish are nicer in that terms than the Dutch.
Molly, did you want to come in?
Well, farming is one of the only industries that is generational still. And it's one of the only industries that you're carrying on the wisdom of your father and mother and your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And I think that we are missing a trick by not investing or exploring what is important there, what's unique there, and what's positive there, and why it needs to continue. So what I mean by that is when we talk about sustainability and the older generation not necessarily being adaptable, fair enough, but maybe what we should be doing is listening. And learning what the wisdom has been for the entire 50, 60, 70, well, 70 would be very impressive if you've been actively farming for 70 years. And then in terms of getting younger people into the sector, I go back to my proposal again. If you have more mixed training, and if you widen the educational scope or the knowledge base, potentially more innovation can happen. So if you're in silos and you might be missing knowledge that could be very, very useful for enhancing innovation in your sector.
Okay. And make it a more attractive career for people to enter into.
Yeah. Like, it is the defining challenge of agriculture is how do you get more young people into it. And like the one thing that, the biggest, I suppose, or noticeable increase in young people coming into farming over the last 15, 20 years was the end of quotas. And that was driven by the economic opportunity that was there. And you could see all these, the number of new entrants every year was always a big figure that was put out by the dairy industry. That growth has stopped now. And it does come down to economics. It's like, all these things are only relevant to people in terms of what it means for their livelihoods. It's like the price of food. And if you're asking someone to go into farming, that's an economic decision. And it's been able to clearly show them how it's going to be.
It's a lifestyle decision as
lifestyle
well, isn't
too.
it, for a lot of younger farmers? I mean, you hear things like work-life balance, which you'd never hear farmers talking about before. There's an expectation of the younger generation, and probably rightly so.
Rightly so, yeah.
There's life outside the farm gate.
But it's definitely attractive, though. Like, you're a business owner, you own the asset. Like, you're not in the office cage in Dublin as well.
It's easier than being a journalist, Niall, isn't it?
Well, you're right.
Okay, we have one more. We have two questions. We'll do these two questions, and we'll probably wrap it up then. Yeah.
How are you? Richard Cooper here from Our Food Connects. I thought the presentations were excellent. I have a question for Niall. So, Niall, you mentioned the importance of building understanding. Research from the ADHB shows that consumer appreciation for British agriculture is at an all-time high over 7 years. So they've done a great job, and programs like Jeremy Clarkson's Farm have really helped that. Just wondering, have you come across any other case studies or examples that have helped build that understanding in your travels?
Just the last bit, examples of...
Examples or case studies that you've seen that have really helped build understanding, consumer understanding and understanding among the general public for agriculture and agri-food.
So to improve the public image, consumer engagement, things like that you saw in other countries?
Yeah, and I'm super interested in the research from Our Food Connects as well, and what they have in store for future. Like, I think education early, like, I'm not saying that like ag science should be like a mandatory subject, but definitely a core offering, not just even in rural Ireland or among a certain demographic. It should be more widely available even in urban centres as well. And if you look at Switzerland again, often you have school tours like from urban centres going out to visit farms. But there's definitely a lot of good work we've done, like AgriAware, like we were able to zoom a farmer into the classroom, like more of that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. And then our last one.
Hi, John Murphy, Cap Network Ireland, and also a farmer in my spare time. I suppose the question from you had there a while ago, oh, well done on the presentations to start with, is this communications piece and working with people to tell our story. But probably a much more difficult question to answer is how can we turn those stories into more profit so that more young people can actually enter the industry again, and that it's actually a economically viable profession for them to join.
Okay, so is it about more visibility then, you think? Yeah. What kind of things, or what should we be doing anything differently?
When I was in Japan, the average age of the farmer there is 70. So the reason why Shota had 20 small parcels was because he was renting them from 20 farmers who were about to retire.
Wow.
But then it was his intention to consolidate them.
Okay.
That's just an anecdote.
So the average age is 70 in Japan, right? What's the average age in Ireland?
60.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And Niall, did you want to come in on that?
Just on John's question, like how we can turn these stories into more profit. And I think there's a huge scope to turn stories into profit by showing that there's more than just commodity markets. And like the amount of farmers now with their own farm shops and, you know, their own profiles and piece to camera and you know, they're processing their own products. Like, I think you can really take advantage of that.
And I think it would do us well to make sure that we're exploiting all markets on island. So there's 500,000 students in primary school at the moment, and if they're all going to get hot meals, they have to eat at least once a day. And if we're supplying Irish food to...
Okay.
Yeah,
and they need to eat the hot meals
They have
as well,
to eat
which
the
would
hot
be a big
meals,
help.
so we need to make sure that those
Yeah.
meals are coming from Irish farms.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to?
I'm less optimistic than the guys on this. Like a lot of the positive communications that farming wants to is the work we're doing on sustainability and you know, really showing that we're working as an industry on these things. But probably the farm in Ireland that was the most focused on sustainability and climate was the Doubt research firm that Devonish had, which had to be sold via kind of a forced sale. And I remember speaking to the owners of it afterwards, and it was like, Lorcan, sustainability does not pay.
Yeah.
And like they were really putting every effort into doing world-leading stuff, but the market was not returning that. They were still selling beef and lamb off that farm for the same price as my dad sells down in. So there's a journey to go there in terms of, because at the end of the day, like Ireland's food system is set up for export into a global market. Even 17 billion in exports last year. That will define a lot of our pricing at the minute. And at right now, again, it goes back to the consumer who's grappling with very high cost inflation. Like I was in the US last week, I always make my habitual trip to a supermarket. Like the price of beef is insane in the US at the minute. Like a packet of mince was $24 for 700 grams. For 2 ribeye steaks in a supermarket, like the equivalent to Tesco, $44.
Okay.
So the people in the ground in the US haven't got any more room to pay for sustainability. They're paying for
Sustainability becomes a lot less important than feeding a
They
family
just want,
when
they
you're at
want
that
something
stage.
that's affordable for them.
Yeah.
So that's the big challenge there.
And I know it's something, making sustainability pay was something that you were touching on, but will we give you the final word, Niall?
Well, no, just we'll find a word to Lorcan, just to get his opinion on the differential payments, like what Fonterra is doing, creating a price gap. Like, is that just symbolic, or do you think that has
That's the way-
potential?
like, and the co-ops in Ireland are starting to follow that. You do see, like, there is sustainability bonuses, and it is the way to go. And because farmers, the farmer members of those co-ops are making efforts, so they should be rewarded for that. It's the challenge is for the co-op then to sell that into the market at a higher premium, and that's tough at the minute, I would say.
Okay, well, that's great. We could talk for an awful lot longer, but we have 3 more returning scholars waiting to give their presentation. So I'd like to thank our panel, Niall Hurson, Molly Garvey and Lorcan Allen. Thank you all very much, and well done in your presentations.